All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Go ahead and get started here. All right, so I start with questions that were asked up to an hour before. So if you got your questions, go ahead and post them. It's going to be below the video if you're on a mobile device. If you're on a larger screen, it's going to be on the right of the video. So let's see here. So I'll go ahead and I'll start here with Toby P. So Toby P says, I went through the move section and was getting great distance in smash numbers, and then moved into the lag section, and suddenly my distance and smash are much worse with really deep divots after the ball. I'm trying to rotate and clear my hips, but it's still happening. Any suggestions? It sounds like to me that you're probably coming down steep, right? So when you're doing the move, that's getting you to shallow out the club and swing from the inside. And if you don't shallow out the club enough and you really try to rotate open, you'll tend to kick this club out and get steep with it and then kind of chop down into the ground. So I don't know if that's what's happening, but if I had to guess, that's most likely what's happening. So what I would do is I get better with the move and I get to where you're actually overdoing the move and then start working on getting the club or getting the hips to open up a little bit more, right? So if you imagine this, let's say I'm overdoing the move. I'm over shallowing the club. So I've got this club way too, the butt end of the club's pointing way too far outside the ball. Ideally, we'd want it to be just a little bit outside the ball, right? So if I have a ball here, if I'm in my setup right here, and then I go up to the top and I'm coming down, and then I want to have this butt end of the club to be pointing a little bit outside the ball when I'm coming down the lead arm parallel. That's a pretty good position for most people to be in. Now, if I get that club, butt end of the club pointing too far, and then I don't rotate my body, right? Well, look, that club's going to work way too much from the inside. Well, now let's say I get that club shallowed out, and then I rotate my body. Now look at where that club goes. I rotate and I come in. So what I'd recommend doing is actually get to where you're shallowing out the club too much. You're getting too much shallow, and then start to work on shallowing out the club. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that when you're getting lag, what gives the appearance of lag? So the appearance of lag comes from three things. One is what we call thumbs up. The technical term for that's radial deviation. So that's where I'm trying to go thumbs up as much as I can. All right, so if I have this club like this, that's thumbs up as much as I can. So you can see that's not a ton of lag, right? It's some lag, but it's not a ton of lag. The other place where it comes from is the shallowing of the club. So that's what the move is. You're going to get, if you're steep initially, and then you get the club shallowing out, that's going to give you more lag. That's going to give you the appearance of more lag. All right, so if you look here, if I go thumbs up, right, and if I have my wrists neutral here, and I go thumbs up as much as I can, and then I shallow the club, right? So if you look from here, I'm going to shallow the club. Now look, that angle gets smaller because of the camera angle, right? Now it looks like if I shallow the club, look how much lag it looks like I have. Looks like I have a ton of lag. I have the same amount. If I turn it like this, I have the same amount as I did before, right? So as far as the thumbs up is concerned. So that's just part of, I think most people, when they're trying to get lag, they're trying to do it all with thumbs up. And you can get more thumbs up if you change your wrist angles like this, right? And if you do that, the club will typically get steep, and that's where you're going to chop down into the ball and lose your solid contact. So what we want to be doing is getting that thumbs up, but getting that club shallowing out as well. And then the last thing that gives that appearance of sharp lag is the momentum of the club, right? So the swing is in motion. I'm bringing this club back this way, and then my hands are going to switch directions, but the club's going to keep going, right? So if you see, if I add those three things together, the thumbs up with the right wrist angles, and I shallow the club with the right wrist angles, and then I have the momentum of the club, look how much lag I can generate doing that. That's a crazy amount of lag there. So that's really where the lag comes from. So what I'd recommend doing is go back, work on the move some more, get to where you're overdoing it, then work toward work toward getting the body to open up, because if you just open up the body without getting the club in a good position, then you're going to tend to chop down and come down steep into it. All right. So let's keep going here. Next question is from Tom S. All right, so Tom S says, Q, at last parallel, I tend to have a gap of a few inches between my trail elbow and my hip. I'm not sliding, but the club appears to be a little steep. Any thoughts? Thanks. Last parallel, what is last parallel exactly? Let me know where in the swing last parallel, and what exactly is last parallel. Are you talking about the club? Are you talking about the lead arm? What are you talking about? So while Tom clears that up for me, we'll go on to Tony V. So Tony V says, could you offer some feedback on impact position for the driver as shown for irons in C091 hit solid irons? So I don't have all the videos memorized, so let me kind of see exactly what video you're talking about. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. The newer one, the one on the precision impact. Yeah, so it's going to be pretty similar. The only difference is because the ball is more forward in the stance, the club's going to be released a little bit more, but the hands are going to be in a very similar position, right? So if I have my iron, right, I'm going to be like this with my iron, and I'm going to have that wrist more in a bent back position because I have shaft lean, right? So I'm more here. And then with a driver, because it's longer, right? The club's longer, the ball's more in front. I'm not going to have as much shaft lean. I'm not going to have as much wrist extension, but I'm going to still have some. What I see, what we have to understand is what the precision impact is doing is it's helping you to develop a feel that you need to have. Obviously, we don't want to keep our wrist in that position all the way through. You know, our swings would kind of look like this, right? We don't literally want to do that. But what most people do is they get rid of that angle very, very quickly in the downswing. So what that precision impact helps you do is it helps you give you the right feel that you need to have in order to keep that angle longer in the swing. So, you know, I actually saw some comments on the video saying, hey, this is exactly what you say not to do. It's not, because you're developing a feel, right? We're saying that you do want to release the club. You absolutely do. But if you're releasing that club early, you're getting rid of that trail wrist extension very early in the swing, then you need to feel like you're not getting rid of it at all in order to in order to be in a place where you get rid of it some, right? What golf is, but what we have to understand is that to get better at golf, you have to adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want. Knowing what to do is really the easy part. It's pretty easy to know what you need to do, but it's much more difficult to actually execute it. And the reason why people have difficulty executing is because you, in order to execute what you want to do, you have to feel something different, right? So if you're someone, it's what I would call fault, feel, real, all right? So the fault is getting rid of this angle very early, right? So my trail wrist is going from here at the top to very early, it's going to flat, or even a lot of times I see people at impact with that trail wrist, it's actually kind of bowed coming into impact, the trail wrist is, because it's releasing so early, right? Well, that person needs to feel like it's in this position and it never ever leaves that position. So that's the feel. The fault is this. We need to feel this coming all the way through. We need to feel that. And then hopefully the reality is something that's more like this, where we have it bent back and then we get it to be in a bent back, less bent back position at impact, but still bent back some. And then we release it out in front. And then in the follow through, it will actually go back to that. A lot of times it will go back to that, a little bit of that bowed position, right? So that's what that precision impact is helping you do. So there's not really any difference for the driver and irons. It's just where you're hitting the golf ball, right? The iron, you're hitting down on the ball in the ground, or on the ground, excuse me, but you're hitting down into the ground, making ball first contact, right? And the club is bottoming out in front of the ball, right? So it's reaching that low point in front of the ball, and it's happening further back in your stance, more toward the middle of your stance. For the driver, that club is now, the ball is now elevated, and it's more forward in your stance. The club is bottoming out before the ball, right? Or in most instances, or very close to the ball, and we're releasing the club a little bit more because the ball is a little bit more in front. So you're just going to have a little less of that angle in your wrist at impact, but it's not much. You still want to have that wrist extended back, right? You don't want to be coming into contact like this with your driver, just like you don't with the irons, because what that's going to do is that's going to add a lot of loft and spin, and you're going to burn a lot of your speed early. It's going to make things very, very difficult to control, right? So that's why you don't want to be doing that. So I think it's a good training aid no matter what you're hitting. You just have to realize where you're contacting the ball, right? And because you're contacting the ball more forward in the stance with the driver, you're typically going to be more angled away. You're going to be more behind the ball, right? You're going to be hitting up because you're trying to hit up on it, right? So here would be driver impact, right? And then here would be iron impact. Right? My trail wrist position is not much different. It's very, very similar. But what that precision impact helps you do is it helps you to exaggerate that position and feeling that all the way through, because that's likely what you need to feel. Now, hopefully you get comfortable with that precision impact on your hand, right? And you get to where you can make swings fairly comfortably doing that, right? And then you take the precision impact off, because obviously you want to get to a point where you can do it without the precision impact, right? The precision impact helps you to develop the feel that you need to have when you take it off, right? So when you take that off, basically what I would do is I would try to maintain that all the way through, maintain that same feeling. And then the best part is that if you actually do it, it's so easy to ease off of it. So whenever you're working on anything, what I always try to do, especially if you're struggling with it, I would try to exaggerate it as much as you possibly can, because in most instances, you can't exaggerate it too much. If you exaggerate it as much as possibly you can, you'll probably just get closer to where you want to be. But if you keep doing that, you'll eventually get to where you want to be, and hopefully get to where you're actually overdoing it. So that way you have to ease off of it a little bit. So that's where I would try to get to with about everything that you're working on. All right, so Nick V says, "Hi Q, I recently recorded my swing, checked my progress on the TSG system. It looks like my compression line and straight line and release are good, but I feel like my hips are almost opening too soon. They are completely open toward the target at impact. What negative effects can this have?" I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be. I mean, I would need to see your swing. If your straight line release is good, then I would say you have. You really can't open your hips too much unless your upper body is not synced up correctly with it, right? So look at Jim Furyk. Jim Furyk's hips are like 90 degrees open at impact. I mean, they're dang near pointing right at the target at impact, right? Most players will tend to not have their body synced up, or have their upper body synced up with their lower body when they do that. So here's Jim Furyk coming into contact. I'll do my best. I'm not as flexible as he is, right? But here's Jim Furyk coming into impact. He's like this, right? His body is really, really open. He's like this as he's coming through. Most people, if they get their hips that open, coming into impact, they'll tend to get stuck, right? And they'll be kind of in a position like this where they're releasing the club early, right? So this elbow will kind of get stuck behind, right? The elbow will get stuck behind, and then they basically run out of being able to open up their hips very much. So then they throw the arms in front. But what Jim Furyk does is he gets that arm stuck behind, but he keeps going, right? And he gets into that position, which is difficult to do. So, but yeah, I need to see your swing. But hey, if you're releasing that club out in front, then that's not a problem, because what that means is you are syncing your upper body with your lower body correctly. So what it comes down to is the top speed golf system. Those are the things that matter the most in the swing. If you look at Jim Furyk's swing, he's nailing the piece of the top speed golf system. But hey, his swing looks a heck of a lot different than Tiger's or Rory's or Dustin Johnson. Dustin Johnson gets his hips very open as well. Not as open as Jim Furyk, but he gets his hips open. But he has his elbow more in front. Maybe you're like this, right? So Dustin Johnson's kind of the opposite of where his elbow placement is, right? So of Jim Furyk. So yeah, I mean, you just have to. That's going to be a more powerful position, right? Because then from here, it's almost like you're throwing, whereas you're here, you're kind of at the liberty of how fast you can rotate. And it's part of the reason why Jim Furyk isn't like a super long hitter, but he is. I tell you what, I mean, he's about as consistent as it gets, right? I mean, he's had a very, very long, plentiful of riches career by being incredibly consistent with his golf swing. But it takes, not everyone's going to be able to swing that way. But for him, it definitely works. But it's going to be hard for him to have speed. But even at playing on the Champions Tour, he has plenty of speed, to play there. So, but he would have a hard time competing, probably at this stage, with the longer courses with the younger guys. But it sounds like it's probably not any issues there, but I would have to see to know for sure, Dick. So Steve D says, I have heard conflicting messages about whether to pull down on the club when starting the downswing. One was do nothing and let gravity pull the club. The other is to pull hard. Please give me your opinion. So as I alluded to earlier, what you're talking about are feels, right? So none of those are actually what's happening, right? So you're not just pulling the club down. You're not going up to the top of the swing and doing this, right? And you're not going up to the top of the swing and just letting gravity drop the club down, right? Those aren't, those are just feels. So, and everyone's feel is going to be different. So you kind of have to find what works best for you. There's no real I wish I could tell you, hey, it's gravity, or you got to pull the club down. It really just depends on, it really just depends on what feel you need to have that matches the issues that may be going on in your swing. So an example would be someone who is trying to open the body too soon, right? Someone who's opening the body too soon is getting the arms to kind of go out here too much. Probably needs to feel like at the top of the swing that club's kind of pulling down in front of them as they start the downswing. So this is actually something you may have seen Justin Rose doing rehearsals for, going up to the top of the swing. I've seen images of him kind of going like this, right? So he's trying to get that kind of feeling of kind of pulling the club down in front of his body, because when he was starting the downswing, he was kind of coming down a little bit steeply on it at one point. And he needs to feel this, let those arms get down, get those arms down, pulling down before he kind of starts rotating through to get that club to work and shallow out nicely. But that may not be the right fit for you. If you're someone who's already kind of closing off your body, and not pushing everything out steep, then that wouldn't be a good feeling for you, because that's just going to make whatever you're having worse. Now, for someone who's I can't tell you the gravity one. I wouldn't say that's. I could see how maybe certain people that could work for them, because maybe it would allow you to give you some time to get the body working before the arms start down. But I could also see how people would just drop the arms with gravity or try to feel like they're dropping the arms with gravity and then still not move the body. So it's hard to say. I'm not a huge fan of the gravity just kind of brings the club down. If you're thinking in terms of gravity, what I would like to think of is the gravity kind of helps you to shallow out the club, right? So if I have this club like this, and I just kind of, if I stop applying force here, I just let gravity kind of do its thing, that's going to shallow out the club. So that's where I would say gravity can be helpful if you have this club in a good position, because you can kind of let it kind of shallow out a little bit. But if you're someone who's like this, who's already steep coming down, if you just kind of let gravity do its thing, you're just going to kind of continue to come down steep. So like I said, these things, they're not right or wrong per se. It's really just, how it applies to you. They're feelings that aren't the reality of what's going on or what you want to be happening in the swing, but there may be feelings to help you to get into that position. Just like the impact, the precision impact thing is helping you to develop that feeling of that right wrist or that trail wrist being in a bent back position. You don't want to have it that way the whole time, literally, but it helps you to develop that feeling that most people have issues with. So that's basically what you're describing there. All right, so Tom S. So Tom S. is saying last parallel is the point where the club is parallel to the ground in the downswing just before impact. All right, so let me go back because I can't recall exactly his question. So at last parallel, when the club's parallel to the ground in the downswing, tend to have a gap a few inches between my trail elbow and your hip. Nothing wrong with that. I don't see any. I'm not sliding, but club appears a little steep. Any thoughts? Thanks. Generally, you're not going to usually have your arm dead up snug to your body. It's completely normal to have some space between, if you're getting here, it's completely normal to have some space between your elbow and your body. If you look here, I've got some space. If you're looking from this direction, I'm wearing kind of a sweatshirt, but you can see, I have some space there as I'm coming down. Now, if you get too much, right, if the elbow gets out too much from your body, the club can get steep. So if you get the elbow more in as you're starting to come down, it can help you to shallow out the club a little bit. One of my favorite drills for that is this ball drill. So this is just a ball. I got it from Target. It was a few dollars. And I think Tour Striker makes a training aid. It's called the Smart Ball. Basically, this is a poor man's version of that, I would say. It doesn't have the little lanyard that comes down on it. But basically what you do is you just take this ball and put it between your elbows, right? And what that can do is really help you in the start of the downswing, right? To get that elbow to push in to that ball as you're starting down, to get the elbow in a better position as you're coming down. You can see if I move my elbow like that, you can see what that does to the club. It shallows out the club. So this is just a couple dollars. Put it between your elbows, do some practice swings with it. And what's a really important note with this is that you're not just pushing the elbows together, that you're pushing your trail elbow into your lead elbow, right? Because if I push my elbows together, they're kind of working against each other, right? Because if I push this elbow that way, that's a steepening move, right? And if I push this elbow that way, that's a shallowing move. So if I squeeze them both together, one's going to be doing shallowing and one's going to be doing steepening. So what you want to do is keep that the lead one is just being pushed against, and you're only pushing against it with your trail elbow here. And if I do that, you can see how that's going to shallow out the club, right? And that's going to get me into that better position as I'm coming down. So that would be one that I would maybe look at doing. That's one of my favorite ones to work on that. All right, so let's keep going here. All right, so keep the questions coming. We got 35 minutes left, so if we don't have any more questions, it's going to be pretty boring the rest of the way. So Tom S. says, Q, I was looking at a video of Clay's swings and noticed his hands appear to be slightly higher at impact than they were at address. Is that what happens? Yeah, typically they're a little bit higher because the club's kind of working up and around the body, right? So the hands are typically going to be, if you're looking from a down the line perspective, the pitch of the shaft is going to be typically be a little bit higher as you're coming through. But if you're looking from this perspective, it's actually going to be typically a little bit lower at impact, maybe slightly lower. But again, the hands are working down and then they're working up, right? David B says, should my swing be the same on all my irons? Yeah, I mean, it's not really going to change from iron to iron. It's only going to change from from shot to shot. What kind of shot you're trying to hit, right? A draw swing is going to be different than a fade swing. A low ball flight swing is going to be different than a high ball flight swing. That sort of thing. But the swing itself, the mechanics, it's going to be mainly the same. I mean, because the irons change, because they change lengths, right? You're going to be your posture is going to be a little different from club to club. So, like if you're thinking about, I mean, I know this is driver versus a wedge, but a 5-iron is probably like that long. So there are some differences there. But this is a wedge. This is a driver. I'm going to be more upright with my driver and more down with a wedge as far as my posture is concerned. But the actual swing itself is not really going to change very much. And as far as tempo and speed, you want it to be basically the same through the bag. Now, again, it depends on what kind of shot you're trying to hit. If you're trying to take a little bit off, I'm generally, if I'm trying to take a little bit off, I'm more of a person to use extra club and then just choke down an inch. So let's say, 7-iron's my 180 club and I got 170. Well, I'm basically between trying to muscle up an 8-iron or choke up on a 7-iron, right? So most times in those situations, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to choke up on that 7-iron and take my normal kind of tempo, speed kind of swing. Now, if I'm in the situation, well, maybe I need to kind of get over something. Maybe I need to hit it high for some reason. In that case, I may muscle up on it and swing harder with a faster speed and tempo to get that extra, 5 yards or so that I need to hit an 8-iron 170, right? So that's kind of what you have to look at. But for the most part, your stock shots are going to be the same. If it's the same kind of shot, it's going to be the same from club to club to club with the for shots that you're hitting off of the turf. All right, let's keep the questions coming here. Like I said, we got 30 minutes or so, and we're out of questions. So keep the questions coming. In the meantime, I'll be kind of getting some of my other work done here. So David B says, I can't hit a draw even after your courses. Is there one thing you can suggest? So let's talk about what gets the ball to draw. If you understand what gets the ball to draw, it makes it a lot easier to be able to do it. So what gets the ball to draw is the face being closed to the path, right? So if we want to put it in terms of degrees, right, I want to have my path be working, let's say, 5 degrees into out, right? And if I want that ball to draw, I need it to be close to that path. Now, I don't want it to be too close to the path because then it's going to overdraw. So basically, you want the face to be close to the path about half as much to the target. So if my face is 5 degrees into out, then I want to have my face about 2.5 degrees close to that path to get it to draw back to the target. So if you think about this in baseball terms, if I'm swinging the club toward first base, into out toward first base for a right-handed golfer, I want to have the club face pointed, halfway between first and second base to get that ball to draw back toward third base, to draw back toward center field. So that's what's happening there. So I would look at your swing and see what's going on there. See if you are, if you're swinging into out enough, right? If you're swinging over the top, you're not going to be able to hit a draw unless it's kind of a pull draw, right? Because if I'm swinging with my path as out to in, right, then the only way I'm going to be able to get that, I have to have the face close to the path to draw, which means that ball's going to start left and go even more left, right? So we have to get that path working into out, and then we have to get that face close to the path. If you want to work on some great drills to help you do that, what I'd recommend is the move course. The move course is really going to help you to get that ball drawing. In fact, what we try to do is we try to get you to over shallow the club, which is going to help you to get the club working from the inside, over shallow it, and then get the face too close. We want you hitting big banana hooks out there, and then you start easing off of it. So that's what I'd recommend doing, is going to the move course and start working through those drills there and really exaggerate it. Don't move on to the next drill until you get going what Clay talks about in the previous drill. I think that's why a lot of people struggle with the moves sometimes, because they get too far out ahead. They're not doing what Clay's talking about in the video previous. Then you would think of each one as a prerequisite for the next one. So you got to be doing what he's talking about there before you move on to the next one. Don't try to hurry through it. To get to the move course, if you're not familiar with where that is, you can click on the instruction tab, then click the Top Speed Golf System, then click the move. So Rick B says, I have a tendency to pull my irons on par threes when I try to make good contact. Any suggestions to help me straighten these out? So a pull, let's go over what causes a pull. A pull is caused by the club path being too much out to in, right? So if you think about, if you're a right-handed golfer, your club path is kind of working toward third base, and then your club face is also in that same direction, right? So club face and path both pointed toward third base. So what you need to do is get that club face and path feel. Again, this is fault, feel, real. The fault is coming over the top, right? Steep, and the face pointing toward the left. The feel is swinging too much from the inside. I'd actually try to hit a block, swing toward first base with the club face in that same direction, and then hopefully the reality is that you hit it straight. Now, a lot of times, when you said you do it to try to make good contact, my guess is that is to try to make ball first contact, right? So when you swing more over the top, you're going to tend to hit the ground more forward, right? When you swing more from the inside, you're going to tend to hit the ground more before the ball. So my guess is, without looking at your swing, but my guess is that you kind of hang back a little bit and come over the top, and that's where that pull comes from. So when you're swinging out to the right, when you're swinging out toward first base, make sure you get a good weight shift to your lead side. So that way, make sure you get a good shift to your lead side, so that way you can hit that ground more in front. So if I show you the divot board here, kind of demonstrate, imagine I'm crazy exaggerating this, right? I'm crazy exaggerating this, and I was swinging 45 degrees in out. So I was swinging toward first base. Where am I going to contact the ground? Way behind the ball, right? You can see my path is really into out there. That's where it's pointing. Now, if I was swinging way over the top, where am I going to tend to hit the ground? More in front. So and that's going to be to the left. So what a lot of people do when they swing over the top, right, they'll kind of hang back in their swing, so that way they don't hit the ground way in front. They'll tend to kind of go like this, right? They'll kind of be flat-footed. They'll stay on their back foot and swing over the top a little bit, and then you'll get that pull. So if I were to shift my weight forward and swing over the top, I would hit the ground way up here, right? So when you swing more from the inside, you can't hang back. Otherwise, you're going to hit the ground even more behind the ball. So you got to make sure you get that shift to the lead side and swing out to first base, right? And then if you do that, you'll be able to get a better contact here as you're coming in into the ball. And ideally, you'd want it to start right at the ball and be just a little bit into out as you're coming through there. So that's what I'd be looking at. Now, if you're having trouble with that, I would recommend working on the move course, getting that club to shallow out, working from the inside earlier, like what I talked about with who asked the previous question. Was it Rick? Yeah, like what I talked about with Rick there. or no, it was David. Right. So Steve D said, I'm fighting early extension and flipping the club at the ball. I'm a multi-year TSG follower. I know what to do, but have a hard time doing it. I usually take a very light grip, like holding a bird grip. What do you suggest? Squeezing harder and consciously bending my right wrist back instead of loose hand action. Yeah, the baby bird thing, you can't literally hold the club like a baby bird throughout the swing. Again, that's a feeling probably that you're having, but you can't literally do that because the club will just come flying out of your hands. Like you can do that at address, right? But throughout the swing, you have to put more pressure into the club. Otherwise, you're just going to throw the club behind you. So that might be a feeling that you have, but that's probably not the reality of what's going on. But you know, if your body stalls out, if you're kind of early extending and you're standing up and your hands are moving high, right, and you're not rotating through, you have no choice but to flip the club. It doesn't matter if you keep the wrist bent back and rigid, because if, let's say I got forward shaft lean, right, and I early extended, well, I'm not down to the ball, right? I have to get down to the golf ball with those wrist angles. So what I'd recommend doing, the best way to kind of work through this is to do it, and you have to regress it to where you can do it. And I go over this a lot with my students. Whenever you're working on anything, you're trying to change something, you have to regress it to where you can do it, right? And in fact, I would try to regress it to where you're overdoing it, and then try to maintain that feel as you progress it. So the key to progression is regression. What a lot of people do is they'll just go out to the range and they'll try to fix their early extension at full speed, full length swing with the golf ball. And it's what I would call the chaos zone, because you just can't do it. Things are moving too fast. You have a motor pattern that's built. You're not programmed to swing that club that way. So you have to train yourself to do it. You have to think about anything you've ever learned to do. You've learned to do slow first, and then you sped it up, right? So keyboarding, typing, for example, you didn't just start typing 100 words a minute out of nowhere, right? You started out slow and you had to kind of figure it out, and then you got better and better, and you were able to get faster and faster and faster. So when you're training a different movement in your golf swing, you have to do the same thing. You have to regress it. So regressing it would be taking away the golf ball. Well, what I like to do is in this order. What I like to do first is slow down the swing. And when I say slow down the swing, I mean literally do like a slow motion swing. What would look like a slow motion swing. So the golf swing in and of itself is something that takes a little over a second, right? From the time the club starts moving back to the time you get into your full finish, it's typically a little over a second. There's not a lot of time to think about what you need to do throughout that whole process. You just can't do it, right? So what you have to do is you have to break it down and go really, really slow, and then build up the speed from there with the proper feel. So what I would recommend doing a lot of times is do a 10-second swing, right? It would be like 10% speed. Do a 10-second swing. So what would a 10-second swing look like? A 10-second swing might look like this. Now, I'm not saying you have to time it. You don't have to go through 1, 2, 3, but you just have to go slow enough to where the swing would take about 10 seconds. So that would look something like this. Right? So that was like a 10, I don't know if it was exactly 10 seconds, but that was a slow swing, right? When you do that, you can think through things, like the slowness gives you the ability to adjust your feel to get what you want, right? And then once you start feeling it right there, and what I would do is I'd do that in a full swing with the golf ball there. Obviously, you're not going to hit the golf ball anywhere, but it's just going to be in the way, right? And then keep speeding it up a little bit, just a little bit. You start getting better with that, you speed it up a little bit more, right? You start getting better with that, you speed it up a little bit more. And then, what you'll find is if you continue to practice this, then you're going to find that you don't have to slow it down as much, right? So the next time you go practice, you may be able to speed it up a lot faster, or you may find you may not have to slow it down as much. So you can kind of do it in reverse order as well. You can go Start out with your full speed, see if you can do it at full speed, and then you can just go try to do it at like 80%, 75%, right? And see if you can do it there. And if you can't, then slow it down again, right? The other option is shortening the swing. You can shorten the swing and see if you can do it in a shorter swing and then try to lengthen the swing. You can try to do it without the ball and then get to where you can do it without the ball, then add the ball. So there's lots of ways to do it, but you have to regress it to where you can do it. You just can't keep trying to do it over and over and over because it's never going to change if you do that, because you haven't trained the movements to be able to do it. Your body just doesn't know what to do. Right? So imagine this. Imagine you were a weightlifter and your goal was to lift 300 pounds, but currently you can only lift 200 pounds. So if you were in that situation, would you try to lift 300 pounds every day? No, you wouldn't, because you can't move it. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to make you any stronger to try to lift 300 pounds. You're just going to try to lift 300 pounds every day, get nowhere, and then it's never going to happen. That's what most people do with their golf games, is they just try to go do it with a swing thought, right? And sometimes you can do it, and a lot of times you can't, right? So most of the time you can't in that situation. You have to break it down to go as slow as you have to go to be able to do it. So what you would do if you were that weightlifter is you would get strong at 200 pounds, right? Then you would get to where you could add a little bit of weight, and then you get maybe go up to 210. You get stronger with 210. Then you get to where you can add a little bit more weight. And then you just keep going and keep going and keep going until eventually you get to 300 pounds, right? So that's basically what it comes down to. So if you've been a multi-year TSG follower and you haven't gotten to where, I imagine you just got to slow it down, break it down. If you do that, I'm telling you, if you do that every day, you'll get to where you want to go. All right, so Ingo S says, hi, after 4 years of playing golf, I feel like I'm still struggling with the left-hand grip. Do you have any videos on that? We have lots of videos on the grip. If you want to check them out, you can, I'll go over it with you real quickly. But if you're ever on the lookout for a video on a specific subject, odds are we have covered everything that you can think of. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of vault videos on the website. So we actually have a search engine that works pretty well. So if you're on the full screen website, that like on a desktop computer, something like that, and the upper right hand corner of the website, you'll see a search bar. You can just search grip and find lots of videos there. If you're on a mobile device, you can also use the search function. It's just a little bit harder to find. All you have to do is click the icon in the upper right hand corner. That will expand a menu. Then if you scroll down the bottom of that menu, you'll find the search box. You can search grip there. But as far as the lead hand, I assume you're right-handed, the left-hand grip is concerned. The easiest way to think about it is to imagine the base of your pointer finger and your pinky finger, right? So what I want this club to go above the base of my pointer finger and below the base of my pinky finger. So that's kind of where you want the hands to go in there. And then I'm going to wrap my fingers around that, and I'm going to have my thumb pretty close to my hand like that. And that's going to give you a nice, secure grip. Now, as far as whether you have it strong or weak, it's really personal preference. If you struggle to get the club face closed, you leave the face open a lot, I would go more toward a stronger grip, which means you're going to put your thumb more on the side of the grip instead of the top of the grip, right? But the reason why we want it to be going through the area of the hands is if we have it going all above the base of the fingers here, so entirely in the fingers, when I grip the club, I can't have my thumb next to my hand, right? If I have it there, then the club's going to move around everywhere, right? If I have it there, I have a gap where the club's going to move around, right? It's just not very secure, right? And if I have it too much in the palm of my hand, if I have the club entirely in the bottom, right, more in the lifeline of my hands, then when I wrap my fingers around, I have lots of gaps. So I have lots of gapping. It's not going to be very secure. And then I'm going to have a hard time hinging the club to be able to get the club to hinge nicely in the backswing because I have it too much in the lifeline of my hand. So that's really the main thing with the lead hand is or with the left hand above the base of the pointer and below the base of the pinky. Wrap your fingers around there. Have this thumb up next to your hand. You can see when I have that, this is nice and secure. My fingers are nicely spread onto the grip. There's no big gaps in here. The club doesn't want to move around everywhere. It's nice and secure, and I can also get some good hinge out of it. Excuse me. So Colin T says, to get the right distance for putts remains tricky for me. Can I use the swing on my lead elbow as a guide? Can I use the swing on my lead elbow as a guide? I'm not sure exactly what that means. Can I use the swing on my left elbow as a guide? Yeah, not sure what that means, Colin. But what I would say, if you want to get better at distance control, it's a skill that you have to acquire through practice, right? So I would just do a lot of practice doing drills for distance control. We have some drills on that in the Tosby Golf putting system. One of my favorite ones is called the ladder drill. So in the ladder drill, what you're doing is I would have like a tee put down for where your starting point is. So if you imagine this head cover here, that's going to be the tee, where the tee would be. So that's going to be my starting point. And then what I would have is another ball that I would put this ball about 25 feet away, 25 feet away. Obviously, I don't have 25 feet here, so I can't show you exactly that. But the goal of this game is to see how many putts you can make, or how many putts you can roll without getting to this ball, right? So, and then whenever you roll this ball up there, that becomes the new object ball. So let me demonstrate. Ladder drill. So I'm going to try to roll it up to that black and white ball that I have there. I'm going to roll it as close as I can to it without going past it. If I hit it or I go past it, the game's over, right? And I'm trying to get as many as I can. So I'm trying to improve my score so I can see if I'm improving. So I'm going to try to roll this up there to that. And direction does not matter with this drill. It doesn't matter if I'm 10 feet to the right. It really doesn't matter. Just as long as I don't go past it, right? And if you hit it, that's going past it. All right. So let me go ahead and try it. I'm going to try and roll this up there without going past it. So that's pretty good. I left it just about 6 inches or so short of that. So now that becomes the new object ball, and I'm going to bring this one back. I have a score of 1 right now. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to roll this ball up to that ball as close as I can without going past it. So again, that's pretty good. I left it up there just about 6 inches short of that one. So now that becomes my new object ball. My score is now 2. I think you get the idea, right? So you're going to keep doing that until you either go past it or you hit it, right? And you see what score you is, and then you keep doing that, and you try to beat your score every time. So there's a little bit of competitiveness there as well. So that's one of my favorite drills. Actually, I take that back. That is my favorite drill to improve as far as like a solo drill you can do. That's my favorite drill to improve distance control. If you want to know my favorite drill to improve your putting, period, is to get a buddy and play a game called Stymies. If you're not familiar with this game, it's a very, very fun putting game that you can play. It's actually better if you have a lot of people in it. But hey, play a little putting game called Stymies. If you're not familiar with I'm not going to go through the rules on here because everyone has a little bit different rules, but you can look it up online if you don't know what it is. Just search Stymie putting game. Just Google that. You'll see what I'm talking about. But put a couple quarters on the game or something to put a little bit of pressure on it. But it's a game that's going to really help you to kind of, to make things more precise and things like that. And play with somebody that may be a little bit better putter than you, right? And then if you start beating them, right, then you know that you're improving quite a bit. So that's. I tell you what, we were doing it was before COVID happened, but we were playing every Wednesday for a couple hours. Just like it was a pretty decent sized group of us that were doing that. And I tell you, we did it for a few months. And I tell you, I played the game a few times before, but not consistently. But playing it once a week for a couple hours with some friends, and it's a fun thing to do as well. If practice can be really fun, then that's a huge plus for me. Because I'm not a huge fan of practicing myself. I'd rather just go play and have fun. But when we did that, I putted my best I ever had in my life. I got to where I was just putting lights out, and I'd never putted better. And I really, I basically lend it all to that game, to playing that game, getting better and better and more precise with things playing that game. So if you really want to get better at putting, I highly recommend. Also among the drills that drill that I talked about, to play that game, because it's fun and it also really helps your putting. All right, so let's keep going here. So that was Colin T. So this is Rick B now. So Rick B says, your tip makes sense. I have been trying to hang back too long, and we'll try shifting my weight better. Thanks. Yeah, but you got to make sure that you swing from the inside as well to get rid of that pull, excuse me. All right, so Tom M says, is it better to hit a hybrid or an iron out of the wet rough? For example, a 150-yard shot. And besides opening the face, do you grip harder with the left hand? My ball comes out dead, and when trying to muscle out an 8-iron. It really depends on how much speed you have and the kind of shot that you're trying to hit. If you're hitting a hybrid 150 yards, I'm guessing that you may not have a lot of speed. So you may want to, the hybrids are made to hit out of all kinds of lies. That's why it's kind of a versatile club. So it really just depends. But it's definitely something that you can try to see if you have a little better luck hitting the hybrid out of there. As far as the left-hand grip, yes, the left-hand grip is going to be firmer, but it's not something that you actively need to try to do. It's just something that naturally happens because the left hand, the lead hand, is the furthest away from the club head. So the most force is going to be the furthest away from it, right? So that is what's happening in the golf swing, but it's not something you need to actively try to do to put more grip, put more force in the handle. It's just something that naturally happens because of the physics and everything that's going on. David B says, thanks for the baseball reference. No problem. All right. So David M says, what advice do you have for putting yips, or is that outside of the scope of TSG? I wouldn't say it's outside the scope of TSG. We would need to find the root cause of the putting yips. When I see people struggle with the putting yips, a lot of times it's because they're taking too big of a backswing, too big of a backstroke, right? So what they'll do is they'll get over the ball. It'll be maybe like a shorter putt like this. And like I said, this is just one thing that I often see that causes the putting yips, is they'll get too far and then they're like, oh crap, if I actually take like a normal stroke from here, I'm going to blast this ball. So then you kind of get the yips or whatever, and I managed to make it, but you're going to make some of them. But that's kind of the main thing that I'd see. So a grip or a drill that I kind of like to do for that, if this kind of sounds like what's happening with you, is to do the opposite of that. So to take a really short backstroke and then try to hit it hard enough to get to where you want to go. So a normal backstroke for, this is probably like a 7-footer, right? A normal backstroke for this would kind of be that for me. This is my carpet, so it's not super fast. So what I'm going to try to do, as you can see, a normal backstroke would maybe be like a 10 to 12-inch stroke for this kind of putt, on a slower green. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to take like a 3-inch backstroke and really make sure I kind of accelerate through it to get the ball there. So let me see if I can do that here. So you can see that can help you to kind of get rid of those yips a little bit. And then what I would do is once I kind of got the hang of that, then I'm going to try to do that kind of in a normal. It's going to help me get the feeling of kind of what a normal stroke, more of a smooth stroke would be like, right? So now that's a much smoother kind of stroke, no yippiness going on there. The other thing that I see people who struggle with yips is they're looking up very quickly. So basically they're hitting the ball and they're kind of looking up right away, right? So that's not so much. It may make you feel like you have the yips, but it's more like just poor mechanics, right? So a good drill that I like to do for that would be where you keep your head down and you guess what happened with the putt, right? So I'm going to hit this putt, and it's kind of close, so I can probably see out of the corner of my eye. But I'm going to try to hit this putt and then guess. I'm going to keep my head down and then guess what happened. I can kind of see out of the corner of my eye, but I would say that was a good stroke and I made it, right? So what you'll do, and that gives you a good feel for what's going on as well, and it trains you to kind of not get up, because if you kind of move up, you'll tend to flip the hands a little bit, and you'll tend to kind of pull putts when you do that as well. So if you keep that head down and let those arms, let your arms kind of pass in front, right? Keep those wrists moving instead of pulling up and flipping a little bit, then you'll be more consistent with it. So again, I'm just going to kind of keep my head down here and try to line it up. I'm going to try to make a good stroke here. I'm going to try to guess what happened there. So I'm going to guess again that was a good putt. And I look up and I know I didn't leave it short, so I'm guessing it rolled up there and came back. So the only other thing I would say on that one is that I hit it pretty hard, right? I feel like, and as you can see, it rolled back. These putt out things, it comes back to you as far as it would have rolled by the hole, right? So that ball was like right there, which means I would have rolled it, 2.5 feet by, which on these slow kind of, on a normal green, that would probably have been 5 feet by. So that'd be like what I would think, okay, I just hit that way too hard. And that would be kind of the feeling. And then you would make an adjustment on the next one. Try to go to a different hole and try to make an adjustment and go in there. So those would be two. There's lots of reasons for the yips, but those are kind of the two main ones that I see. Too big of a backstroke and then having to kind of halt things down. You kind of get nervous and you don't make a good through stroke, because if you did, you're going to blast it over, right? So if that sounds like you, do that short backswing, accelerate through, and then try to just tone that down to get a better stroke going. So Dennis P says, love your advice about the weightlifter. I'm definitely trying that course of action. No problem, Dennis. Like I said, my favorite is to just slow down. Try to do it in a slow motion swing. I think that's my favorite thing to do. And what I like to do is I like to start out to see if I can do it at full speed. And then if I can't, because sometimes you can, depending on what the change is, sometimes you can do it at full speed. There are certain things that are a lot easier to change than other things, like a shoulder turn, for example. I think getting a bigger shoulder turn is much, much easier than trying to fix early extension. It just is. And the reason for that is that things are moving, it's something you're doing mostly in your backswing, right? So things are moving a lot slower in your backswing, so it's easier to kind of think those things. And also, you're not hitting the ball with your backswing. So you're hitting the ball more with your downswing, which the motor patterns you're programming, you're going to take over a little bit. So you have to slow down. And anything in the downswing, you're typically going to need to slow it down, break it down, go really, really slow with it, and then build it up. And then if you still can't do it in a really slow swing, then what I would do is I'd try to do it in like a, either try to do it where you're like clipping a tee instead of hitting a ball, or doing it in like a 3/4 swing. So basically just keep regressing it until you're seeing what you want. And then from there, you try to build on that. And then it breaks down, then you go back slower again, or shorten it up again. And then you get to where it's good, then you try it again. And if you keep doing that, you're going to break through, at some point you're going to get to where you're breaking through with it. So that's just the process in which you got to kind of work through things. All right, so we're about right at 4 o'clock, and we don't have any more questions left. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Come tomorrow with some questions, and we'll get them answered. Everybody have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you all next time.